Good morning, everybody tuning in. It is 4:15 a.m. here in central Oklahoma, and I am going to be expanding on this examination of how Bishop Strickland, the reasoning behind him getting canned. And none of this will really surprise anybody, but I think we need to take a zoom out here a little bit because Bishop Strickland is, as you know, not the first to have been cast aside by Francis in an act of great mercy and accompaniment and synodality. So we're going to talk about this today, and there's an overarching value here that I want to show you, and this value is something. Taylor Marshall posted this on Twitter as kind of a joke, really, as a joke response, but I'm going to show this to you. So here he says somebody accused him of being that he doesn't have the spirit that apparently Taylor Marshall teaches a rigid, outdated heresy. He goes against everything Vatican II. To which, of course, he responds with rigid, outdated heresy. What, pray tell, is a rigid, outdated heresy? Well, it's the idea, essentially, as an observer, that we could see through all this as a through line for all of these canceled bishops, that essentially we should rigidly cling to the faith as it's always been given to us, that the faith doesn't really change. It does develop, but it doesn't change. Our understandings of things deepen, and our ability to communicate in a changing social, political environment, all that might adapt to it, but the faith doesn't change. The truth is immutable. Our understanding grows of the truth, but the truth doesn't change. And for this, we get called rigid. That's really how it all boils down to. So I am going to show you here a couple things. And because I started asking, how many bishops has Francis canceled like this? Strickland is probably the highest profile right now, but he's still not the highest profile that's been canceled. We're going to start. I found an article published in the last couple days from an Italian news blog that kind of examined this question, and they forgot one person on this list that they compiled. So we're going to actually go to the obvious omission that they accidentally left out here. And we're going to go and start. I don't know how they did this, but they forgot to include Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano. You may not know why Vigano was actually dismissed from being the papal nuncio to the U.S., which helped get the ball rolling on things. But this article, again, is from the New York Times, so bear in mind there is, of course, they're going to be their bias in all of this. But in their bias towards this, you're going to see the planting of the seeds that were used against Vigano. Remember, the Pope splainers basically accused Vigano of being angry that he never got the red hat, that he was never made a cardinal. Okay. And that's what a lot of them are saying. And I almost wonder if Cardinal Pierre, the current papal nuncio, was made a cardinal at his, advanced age as sort of a slight against Vigano. But I don't think Vigano was upset that he didn't get the red hat. I think this is the New York Times really does go into why this happened. This article came out in like 2018, a week or so after Vigano's groundbreaking testimony, that famous letter accusing Francis of having swept all the Ted McCarrick problems aside. And here, now this is, of course, meant to undermine Vigano, this article is, but it does show you here the thinking that went behind Francis initially canceling Vigano back in 2015 or 2016. So, from the article, quote, as the papal ambassador or nuncio in the United States, Archbishop Vegano sided with conservative culture warriors and used his role in naming new bishops to put staunch conservatives in San Francisco, Denver, and Baltimore. But he found himself iced out after the election of Pope Francis. They're accusing him of having manipulated Benedict, basically. Then in 2015, he personally ran afoul of Francis. His decision to invite a staunch critic of James Martin's stuff to greet the Pope in Washington during a visit to the United States directly challenged Francis's inclusive message and prompted a controversy that nearly overshadowed the trip. Juan Carlos Cruz, a survivor of Ted McCarrick things, with whom Francis had spoken at length, said the Pope recently, back in 2018, told him Archbishop Vigano nearly sabotaged the visit by inviting the critic Kim Davis, a Kentucky county clerk who became a conservative cause celeb. Remember those days when she refused to grant certain legal permissions to James Martin types. I didn't know who that woman was, and he snuck her in to say hello to me. And of course, they made a whole publicity out of it, Pope Francis said, according to Mr. Cruz. And I was horrified, and I fired that nuncio, Mr. Cruz recalled the Pope saying. Now, 3 years later, Archbishop Vigano appears to be trying to return the favor. End quote. That's from the New York Times. So he was the first one that he did this to. And in 2018, people might have had a hard time believing this, that it was all about rigidity and about this clinging to traditional Catholic teaching on all sorts of things. But now we have the proof right there. It's going back to original kind of reporting from what seems like an eternity ago in the before times back in 2018. But that's what we see from Vigano. That's where we got Vigano getting canceled. And I bring Vigano into this because we're going to go talk now and look a bit at who everyone has been pushed aside by Francis. So we turn to the Italian news blog Mesa in Latino. Now, this is an Italian language article. I have a translation extension on Google Chrome for simple things like live streams. Normally, usually if I'm doing a pre-recorded video like the one that's going to go live in about 40 minutes about Cardinal Robert Sarah, if there's a foreign language source, I'll run it through an actual proper translator, but this will do the job for us here. So their article is called "All the Bishops and Monsignors Purged by Pope Francis," and they're reprinting this article from another source here, so you can see. But in the italics here, they actually add a few that the article missed, because as you will see, there's quite a few here. So let's start here. Nico Spuntini presents us with a list of other ecclesiastics. These are bishops and cardinals of the Curia purged by Pope Francis. Alas, we fear that the list is incomplete because the following also come to mind. Monsignor Mario Oliveri, Bishop of Albenga Imperia, who always refused to resign. There being no reasons, and was placed under commissioner by Francis at the age of 72 and then removed with such mercy. Meaning he was removed without having been reached the retirement age of 75. He was just removed. Archbishop Morandi, secretary of the then CDF, removed from his position even though his first 5-year term had not yet ended, and sent to govern a small Italian diocese. That was not even an archdiocese. They sent an archbishop to govern a regular diocese, not an archdiocese. With Monsignor Morandi was also purged a good Monsignor Matteo Vizioli, the undersecretary for the dicastery of the doctrine of the faith, who was Morandi's right-hand man, and he was sent to be a parish priest in the Apennines. Then Cardinal Stella, wanted by Francesco's prefect for the Congregation of the Clergy, but after the end of the 5-year period, he no longer gave him any assignment. This was a cardinal, Cardinal Stella, given no job. His right-hand man, Monsignor Jorge Carlos Patron Wong, secretary for the seminaries of the Congregation for the Clergy, wanted by Cardinal Stella in 2013 and fired following a very controversial audience, was also purged with the cardinal. It would seem that the Holy Father dismissed the Mexican prelate in a few minutes by sending him to the small and remote archdiocese of Jalapa. So that's several you have here. Cardinal Piacenza, prefect for the clergy since 2010, fired prematurely already in September 2013 after only 3 of his 5 years in office, to be sent to the Apostolic Penitentiary. Archbishop Monsignor Pozzo, he was the president of the Pontifical Commission of Ecclesia Dei, downgraded to an El Monsieur of His Holiness, and now at 72, secretary of the Pontifical Sistine Musical Chapel. Given a job, but one that doesn't matter at all, when he had been the president of the Pontifical Ecclesia Dei Commission. That's a big deal. Then you have Bishop Monsignor de Cole, Bishop of Ascoli Piceno, forced to resign at just 73 years of age and not for health reasons. Then, of course, Cardinal Robert Sarah, whose resignation he accepted as soon as he turned 75. And remember, Cardinal Sarah is one who until recently was well respected by people across the board in the church because he is clearly a sharp theological mind. And then you have the 2 secretaries of Benedict XVI, Monsignor Gonsfine, already basically perfectly halved with the Pope Emeritus alive, who was officially sent away after a few months after Benedict's passing and sent to Germany without an office at only 67 years of age, or 8 years until he retires. Then he had Monsignor Alfred Zurab, Ratzinger's second secretary, fired in June of 2023 at the end of the 5-year period of his office as Apostolic Nuncio in South Korea. He had been, after being Benedict's secretary before Gonsfine was, sent to South Korea to be the apostolic nuncio. And he was no longer entrusted with any task despite being only 65. And the only reason anybody knows about him being fired is because a small South Korean Episcopal conference website made note of it. Nobody in Catholic media noticed this and reported on it. So you have several there, most of them connected to Benedict in some way. And so now we get to the actual article that they were reprinting. So they have Monsignor Hector Aguirre, who I've given a couple letters from recently, the Archbishop of La Plata. He must not have jumped for joy when he saw his compatriot Jorge Mario Bergoglio appear for the first time from the central loggia of St. Peter's Basilica dressed in white. The two, in fact, met first as auxiliaries of Buenos Aires, then respectively as owners of the two most important Argentine dioceses. And when they say owners, I mean ordinaries. Again, Google Translate's not the best for this, but it does, you get the idea. Of the opposite sensibility to Bergoglio, Aguirre was Bergoglio's great opponent within the Argentine Episcopal Conference. In 2018, 7 days after blowing out his 75th birthday candle and therefore reaching the canonical age to resign as archbishop, Aguirre was abruptly dismissed with the appointment of Monsignor Alberto Germain Bauchetti as an apostolic administrator and the request to immediately leave the residence, meaning Aguirre was told to leave the residence immediately right after his birthday. He had no job and no home, but he managed to find hospitality with a local Greek Melkite bishop of the Catholic Church. All right, so now we have the removal of an Opus Dei official. One of the presidents, similar to that of Strickland, dates back to 2014 and involved the Paraguayan bishop Rogelio Ricardo Leveres Plano, deprived of his diocese while he was in Rome. Even in that case, the change to the Diocese of Ciudad del Este with the appointment of an apostolic administrator took place at the end of an apostolic visit and was motivated by serious pastoral reasons in the name of the greater good of the unity of the local church. That's practically verbatim what they said about Strickland. Monsignor Leveres Plano, a member of Opus Dei and a bishop who went against the tide of the majority of the Paraguayan episcopate, who could hardly tolerate him, meaning Bergoglio, also due to the favor he enjoyed with John Paul II, who was urged to resign, refused this option. Again, they asked him to resign, but he said no, sought in vain for an audience with Francis, was then branded that the decision as unfounded and arbitrary and for which the Pope will have to answer to God more than me. Meaning, it was another arbitrary, unfounded dismissal. And for those who think that Bishop Strickland earned being it for bad management, I have to be the bearer of bad news here. I have been connected well enough to various dioceses around the country to know that if you look at any single diocese in the country, large or small, you're going to find those management problems, whether they're related to Ted McCarrick things not being handled properly, or if it's certain groups of priests feeling alienated because they are of the wrong internal church ideological part of the political spectrum or whatever. It's in every diocese. Citing that as a mechanism to get rid of Strickland it does put every bishop on notice. They can get rid of them for any reason. It's also against canon law, apparently. Maybe I'll go over that in the future. I'm waiting for some canon lawyers to actually start writing their articles and publish them on this, because that's a very important thing. But then we get another bishop. In the ordinary bulletin of the Holy See press office of the 9th of March 2022, the news of the revival of the Bishop of Arecibo, the consequent appointment of an apostolic administrator, appeared. Monsignor Daniel Fernandez Torres, at just 57 years old, has been sent to retirement. No reason was given in the official communication. The prelate, born in Chicago and ordained bishop at just 43, he was in Puerto Rico, by Benedict XVI, had received the Pope's invitation to resign, which he refused. Following the news of the lift of the conservative orientation, Fernandez Torres has stood out for his criticism of the policies related to the flesh. It's also worth noting he didn't go along with the 2020 crisis solutions and did not want to refused to send his seminarians to the one papally approved seminary in Puerto Rico. It was extremely modernist. He just refused. For those reasons, they got rid of him. And then you had the case of Monsignor Michel Apoti. He was Francis, who appointed him, a former doctor and brilliant bioethics expert with a conservative orientation, as Archbishop of Paris. Despite the prestige of the archdiocese, the name of the French archbishop never ended up on the list of consistories. And what happened with him is interesting. A French secular newspaper ran some allegations that he had illicit relations with a woman. The woman read it, found out about this for the first time by reading the article. It was news to her. She vociferously denied it, but her denial didn't matter. Francis got rid of the guy for being a hypocrite, a moral hypocrite. Again, no due process, no canonical process followed. Somebody who was of the conservative bent was just immediately released. Bear in mind that the people who investigated Bishop Strickland were definitely not of the conservative bent and had been known for sweeping Ted McCarrick problems aside and had been known as being sympathetic, we'll say, to the James Martin cause. They were the ones who were sent to investigate Bishop Strickland. And then you've got, of course, some of the highest profile ones of all. These are the Curials, as they call them. These are from the Roman Curia, veterans. The beginning of the Francis pontificate brought about the fall from grace of some prelates who had held roles of great responsibility in the previous pontificate. In 2014, Cardinal Raymond Leo Burke, until then prefect for the Supreme Tribunal of the Apostolic Signatura, was appointed patron of the Sovereign Order of Malta at just 66 years of age, a position generally attributed to older cardinals. Since last June, the American cardinal, one of the most representative men of the critical alignment with the line of the current pontificate, has also ceased his role, in which in reality he no longer held de facto since 2017. We're talking about here Giovanni Angelo Becciu, if you're familiar with him. Remember the Vatican financial scandals from a few years ago? He was center of that. Burke was sent to the the Knights Order of Malta, but then he was even removed essentially from that too. So based on decisions he didn't even make. And then finally, you got Cardinal Gerhard Ludwig Mueller, wanted by Benedict XVI to lead the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, and not reconfirmed at only 69 years of age after 5 years of mandate by Francis. That's relatively young. There was no shortage of clashes between the two in the first 6 years of the pontificate, in which they found themselves collaborating side by side. Mueller has been waiting for a new job for 6 years. He has now hit the official age of retirement. And there you have it, folks. That's the list that we know so far of those who have been dismissed from the service to the church by Francis. These are monsignors, these are bishops, these are cardinals. Notice the names. Okay, I started with Vigano because that's the one that wasn't included in that list. But then you get Mueller, Burke. You get a lot of very high-profile people. The Archbishop of Paris. Okay, these are all people who had one thing seemingly in common, and that was that they were more aligned ideologically and theologically with Benedict than they were with Francis. I have been putting together a video for probably Friday, honestly, going over what sort of the new theology in Francis Church, the synodal church. It'll be worth your time to view. And I'll mention here again that I have a video going live shortly in the next half hour about Cardinal Robert Surratt, where he's diagnosing what's going on in the church right now. This is important stuff because there is a bigger picture here that we must pay attention to when talking about about the dismissal of Bishop Strickland. And I will mention here, Bishop Strickland is in Baltimore for the USCCB conference. He's not participating in the conference. He is there praying outside. There's going to be prayers, I think, at noon today, Baltimore time, which would be where I'm at, 11 a.m. Central Time, and then adjust as accordingly. Praying, I believe, the Rosary for the essentially the igniting of the faith inside the hearts of the bishops at the attendance. So go there, and if there are Catholic media outlets out there, tweet at them, ask them to ask pointed questions about Bishop Strickland and what happened and what the bishops there think. 1 Peter 5 is suggesting offering St. Martin's Lent for Bishop Strickland. Most people don't know about St. Martin's Lent. It started 3 days ago, but there used to essentially be like 3 Lents in the church. There was what we'll use the term the Eastern Orthodox and the Eastern Rites of the Catholic Church use. Great Lent. That's the Lent that you're used to. And then there was St. Michael's Lent and St. Martin's Lent, which are lesser Lents. But essentially, if you're not wanting to jump into what's now considered an alternative Lent, I would at least offer any prayers and fastings and maybe some abstinences for Bishop Strickland. But yes, that's what's going on. We have a lot of bishops that have been pushed aside in the last decade simply for the crime of being overly rigid, and which is why I bring you back to this one, to what Taylor Marshall shared on Twitter, where he was accused of not having the spirit of teaching rigid, outdated heresy, that he goes against everything Vatican II, to which he responded correctly, rigid, outdated heresy. What does that even mean? Well, you see, heresy is defined as, denying a dogma of the faith. And I guess rigidly clinging to what we've been told, what the faith taught before the only council that seems to matter anymore, makes you a heretic. If you think about that, if you could make that work, let me know, because I don't understand how that works unless we accept what the modernists have been saying at face value, which is they're building a new church. They have said this. We have a new way of being church, the new synodal church. Think about that, the implications for that, please. Is it that kind of a theory, Marine asks? Sort of, yeah, essentially replacing the Catholic Church with something new. That's what I've suspected for a while that they've been doing, but that's what it is. And yes, Marine says, hit that like button. That does help. And commenting or whatever, like the live chat being lit up, helps a lot too. So I will take any questions now, or any questions, just questions or super chats, however you want to do it now before we sign off, because tend to try to keep things a little bit short. Although when I upgrade my StreamYards here in a few weeks, in a couple weeks, I'll probably go a little longer. From Aguiland, can Bishop Strickland move anywhere he wants, say, to work with canceled priests and maybe start a new seminary? He could go the Archbishop Lefebvre route, and I would not be opposed to that. But I am very openly believe that Archbishop Lefebvre did nothing wrong. That he had every right to believing that there was a crisis in the church, that the church was in a state of emergency in the 70s and 80s, and that he acted accordingly. He could go that route. The chances of him working with like the SSPX are small to none, probably. I've suggested that he work with Archbishop Vegano, who started his organization Exsurge Domine. I want to really explore the Exsurge Domine website, see what I can find out about them. But they started as an Italian organization, but just started an American branch in the last few months. That their purpose is to support traditional priests. These are priests dedicated to the preconciliar liturgy and the preconciliar form of the sacraments, essentially giving them support and coordination and other kinds of things. And Archbishop Vegano is like 78 years old, so he really does need to start thinking about getting some assistance so that the organization can carry on after him, in the same way that Archbishop Lefebvre was looking towards having to keep the SSPX going after he was gone. Joseph says ideology beats orthodoxy. It does. In the synodal church of the New Advent, it certainly does. If they've had their faculties to say mass revoked, technically no. But again, there comes a point where you have to ask if these orders are legitimate or not. And I agree with Marge. Without Archbishop Lefebvre, we would have no traditional mass. God bless his holy man. Thank God for the SSPX. And the smoke of Satan has entered the church. Absolutely. I don't understand why people think the SSPX are in schism. You don't go into schism by standing still. You go into schism by saying things like, we need a new way to be church. And we need the new synodal church. That's how you go into schism, is to try to change things. But that's, part and parcel of where we are right now in the present church. So any final questions here before I sign off for the morning? Let's see. Good morning to all those wishing good morning. And Cardinal Pierre told Bishop Strickland that there is no deposit of faith. He did say something to that effect, yes. He questioned the concept of a deposit of the faith, which is so weird because that's like Catholicism 101. You hear that stuff like day one of RCIA. I know, I used to be on an RCIA team. Hello to you in Perth, Australia. Stephen says, there can be no doubt about what Francis is up to when the Babylon Bee features this headline: Pope fires bishop for being too Catholic. Yeah, that's gone all across social media. And it's the kind of thing you would laugh at if it wasn't such a tragedy. Anyway, And what about Father James Martin? No, he's in good standing. He's in good standing. That's the kind of priest they like. Anyway, am I still live? Yes, but I'm about to sign off. I would recommend watching from the beginning if you want a real list of how many of these bishops they've swept aside for being too rigid. Anyway, thanks for tuning in, folks. You have a blessed day.